Thank you for joining me on 13 Plus. I'm Cali Lichter, and this is On the Docket, a weekly recap of crime and court in and around the state of Michigan. This week, we bring you an update on a gruesome animal hoarding case out of the east side of the state, why the suspects were here in Grand Rapids. Plus, city leaders are speaking out about officer-involved shootings following the February death of Daquan Johnson in Grand Rapids. And a Third Ward Grand Rapids City Commission candidate does not want to be defined by his past as a juvenile lifer. He says that experience is going to help him serve the Third Ward. All of that and more is on the docket. We have continuing coverage here on the docket of a gruesome animal hoarding case out of the east side of the state. We spoke to one of the owners as that case initially broke back in February. In February, 91 animals were taken from the Flint Township home. 64 were living in filthy conditions. The rest were dead. But the owner says he would never do anything to hurt his pets and wanted his babies back. Before we, spoiler alert, tell you about this man and his wife's arrest and subsequent charges, we want to bring you back to February 18th. We do want to warn you, some may find parts of this story disturbing.
Well, we love animals. We love them. I will not abuse. I will not hurt an animal.
The Flint Township Police Department, however, says the animals found inside Kim Shire's house experienced prolonged suffering.
Oh my God. No.
Go get the reader.
The what?
Go get the air reader.
Air reader.
The Flint Township Police Department released this body cam footage Tuesday. They say they found more than 60 animals, mostly dogs, alive inside a home, surrounded by piles of feces and rotting furniture, as well as high amounts of ammonia, making the house uninhabitable. According to a Facebook post by the department, along with the living animals, they found more than 20 dead, stuffed inside trash bags near the front door.
They just rushed in, busted the door down, went in there, took all my babies, and said, "You're the worst person on the face of the earth."
Wednesday, 13 on Your Side was contacted by Shires, who owns the house. He tells us the animals were there as part of an effort by him and his wife to start a rescue shelter.
We wanted to build a facility out back for them to house them and do our own little rescue right there. The problem was I needed help. I didn't need the Flint Township Police Department kicking my door in and defaming me and making me look like the worst person on the face of the earth. I needed help.
We showed Shires the video released by the department.
Oh, they got them in cages. Oh, Ruthie! There's Ruthie!
He admitted the poor condition of the house as we watched the video.
The room in there flooded. It swole up the floor right there, so I cleaned all that up. But that's all trash from where the dogs got a hold of that little couch over there.
Yet, Shires maintains the house was livable.
Hey, I lived there. I lived in that house. I didn't have to have no dust mask. Do I look like I'm about ready to fall over dead?
Shires says he and his wife are in Grand Rapids for a separate family matter, but did say he was reluctant to go back to the house.
The letter they had on the table pretty much told me that if they got a hold of me, they were going to do whatever they could do to me. I just want my babies back. I don't care.
Grand Rapids police assisted in tracking down Brenda Shires in March at an address in the city. But at the time of her arrest, they say Kim Shires may have fled the state to avoid prosecution. Our Michael Martin has the latest on the case.
It smacks you in the face, don't it?
Back on February 17th, officers performed a search warrant on this home in Flint Township, describing it as, quote, overwhelming filth, toxic air, death. 26 dogs, 1 cat found dead inside.
Here, we'll push these guys outside.
Yeah.
As seen in the video shared from their body-worn cameras, another 61 dogs and 3 cats found still alive. Police say test results found hazardous concentrations of ammonia throughout. Thursday, March 12th, Brenda Shires is picked up in Grand Rapids. Police say her husband, Kim Shires, may have fled the state for Tennessee in an effort to avoid criminal prosecution.
Oh, we love animals. We love them. I will not abuse. I will not hurt an animal.
After the animals were initially seized, Kim called 13 on Your Side asking to share his side of the situation.
We wanted to build a facility out back for them to house them and do our own little rescue right there.
According to Kim, they had good intentions but became overwhelmed.
The problem was I needed help. I didn't need the Flint Township Police Department kicking my door in and defaming me and making me look like the worst person on the face of the earth.
Though Flint Township Police said in a statement, this was not a temporary lapse in judgment. Conditions like this do not happen overnight. This was prolonged suffering. Michael Martin, 13 on Your Side.
Flint Township Police are adamant their work in this case is not done, saying in a statement those animals, including the ones who were left to die, deserve justice. Brenda Shires was arraigned on 3 charges, including 2 felonies, animal cruelty, and killing or torturing animals. The following day, police say Kim Shires, who we interviewed, was found hiding at a hotel in Indiana. He will now be extradited back to Genesee County. Next on the docket, the city of Grand Rapids says they are launching a review into officer-involved shootings following the death of Daquan Johnson. Hear from the city manager, the interim police chief, and Johnson's mother next. The city of Grand Rapids is launching a review into officer-involved shootings, and it follows February's deadly officer-involved shooting between Grand Rapids Police and Daquan Johnson. City Manager Mark Washington detailed what they'll be looking at during an afternoon city commission meeting. Our Nick Nelson was there and has the details.
City Manager Mark Washington is filing a report outlining a review focusing on 3 specific issues surrounding officer-involved shootings in the wake of the shooting death of Daquan Johnson. A gathering in front of City Hall Tuesday called for more transparency surrounding the shooting death of Daquan Johnson last month by a Grand Rapids police officer.
What are you really gonna do as elected officials so that another mother isn't standing here asking you and watching some of you blatantly look away and do nothing as our children are being murdered by the GRPD.
Johnson's mother, Angelica Johnson, pleaded with the city commission to do more. City Manager Mark Washington says he intends to do that. He says he plans to review the data on officer-involved shootings over the past 5 years. A recent 13 on Your Side investigation showed that there were 12 officer-involved shootings over the last 4 years.
This review is not to reinvestigate or relitigate any actions that have already been decided. It is an informational review about our policies and practices at large.
Washington added he won't specifically be looking at the Johnson case due to the ongoing investigation that's partially in the hands of the Kent County prosecutor Chris Becker. Johnson says she met with Becker recently and still wants more accountability from the police department.
I want to see the video footage. I want to see the autopsy. Where's the medical report? Why didn't the dog get refrained after they shot my son?
Interim Police Chief Joe Trigg says the department can't release any more footage as the investigation by Michigan State Police remains ongoing.
Once it gets in MSP's hands, it's kind of out of our hands at that point. You don't want to compromise the investigation. You don't want to make comments to try to act like you're misleading any of the facts of the circumstances, so that's just trying to maintain the integrity of the investigation.
Washington says he also wants to look at the department's pursuit and canine policies, as well as the Civilian Appeals Board. In the newsroom, Nick Nelson, 13 on Your Side.
We were able to get interviews with both Trigg and Washington. Here's a part of Interim Chief Trigg's interview, which is the first time GRPD has addressed officer-involved shootings since the initial press conference.
I'm all about the review. Okay, I stand behind our policies. We are CLIA accredited, which is a national organization that reviews our policies, and we maintain that accreditation. So that's a very comprehensive look and dive into all of our policies, and that our policies are in the top 5% of those in the nation. So I encourage any review of our policies. I believe you're going to find that GRPD does things to a high standard. Yeah, of course, we looked at it closely, but we're always reviewing our policies. Like I say, we're always trying to look for something that's a way to improve our policies. We never want to be stagnant, right? So Deputy Chief Baker happens to be our K-9 commander. So having his leadership in his interim role is key, especially during this time. It's someone that knows K-9s a lot better than I do. So we've discussed the recent application and our history of the unit. So like I say, we're prepared to assist OPA with any review or any documentation they need from us. Yeah, I mean, we obviously have the internal affairs process, right, where citizens can complain about any interaction with our officers or during a K-9. So we have had complaints about the K-9 application itself, yes. Yes, similar. I think a lot of it is misunderstanding of exactly, you know, at what times is a K-9 application or use of the K-9, you know, permitted by policy. I know the incident involving, you know, Mr. Henry Weimer outside of St. Mary's. There was where our K-9 was trying to drag him away from a weapon so we could advance and actually render, you know, first aid. So it doesn't look great. I understand to those that don't understand what the dog is actually trying to do, and it's not mauling or looking to inflict any more harm, but it's trained to do it. I think there's an educational process where we can potentially show all the uses of what our K-9s are used for and what they're used for nationally during their training, so to assist officers in their job. And in that situation, it's so we can move up safely and render first aid. Yeah, we're not going to release anything. Last thing we want to do is compromise the integrity of MSP's investigation. Any agency during these times, they're going to release something initially just because there's narratives out there. You want to release that information as soon as possible on what happened. At that point, once it gets in MSP's hands, it's kind of out of our hands at that point. You don't want to compromise the investigation. You don't want to make comments to try to act like you're misleading any of the facts of the circumstances. So that's just trying to maintain the integrity of the investigation.
We also spoke to City Manager Mark Washington about the review.
Well, the report originated based on a discussion from the last meeting on the 24th of February, where there was discussion from both Public Safety Committee as well as commissioners asking about the specific officer-involved incident, which we were not able to really talk about because there's a pending investigation by the Michigan State Police and a subsequent review by the prosecutor. But we began thinking about what other things could we do to continuously improve as a police department, and particularly improve community police relations and trust outside of this specific incident. So there was a request to review all the officer-involved shootings within the past 5 years or so and evaluate the circumstances for which they occurred. Was the officer fired upon first, the time of day, was there backup, what were the other attempts of de-escalation, just kind of getting a situational analysis because we can't treat all the incidents the same. And there's been a lot of discussion, particularly in light of the latest shooting and the Patrick Leoya incident, that all of the incidents are occurring with similar type of response from the Grand Rapids Police Department. So we want to just do a very information-based response. I know there's a lot of emotion around that because there are lives that have been lost, and we're very sensitive to that. But in addition to the emotions, I think it's important to take a step back and look at the information and data, and we can begin to have another lens in which we're looking at some of these incidents. Unfortunately, again, we're not going to be able to evaluate the last shooting or any incident that is under litigation or investigation. The other data component was a benchmark analysis of our pursuit policy. And this is really just a comparative analysis learned from other departments who are similarly sized, who are similarly situated in urban areas like we are, to evaluate what some of the other practices are, our policy in line with other departments and other jurisdictions. What can we learn from what's happening in other areas, and how we might be able to improve, or are we the benchmark for certain jurisdictions? We've been told that in other manners of policing efforts. And then lastly, a review of the Civilian Appeals Board. The current practice, we've heard concerns from CAB members, we've heard concerns from elected officials, or I've heard concern from police officers who have both presented and been part of the appeals board process. And so taking a step back to see what can legally and contractually be improved upon. Are there other practices that we can learn from? And that is not a uniform, I can't just unilaterally make any changes. Even if we identify what the improvements are, there's a process that we have to go through to execute some of those changes.
Next on the docket, I sat down with a candidate for 3rd Ward Commissioner here in Grand Rapids, which sounds more like a politics story. But Richard Griffin's campaign has drawn attention as he is a former juvenile lifer. A candidate in the Grand Rapids City Commission race who has gained attention running 3 decades after he was sentenced for 2nd-degree murder. Richard Griffin does not want to run from his past, but wants to use his experiences to address what's needed in the 3rd Ward. Richard Griffin grew up on the southeast side of Grand Rapids. He knows how people in the 3rd Ward feel about their voices being heard in local government.
And experience the things that we've experienced, we need leadership that understands what we're going through.
He also shares the community's concerns with violent crime and gun violence in the ward.
If those persons with lived experience aren't at the table, then we're kind of at the mercy of anybody who's structuring what programs or possibilities there are to move young men and women into a different direction.
Griffin wants to be at that table and is throwing his hat in the November race for the commissioner seat. But Griffin also acknowledges people might be hesitant about his campaign, as Griffin was a former juvenile lifer.
I don't run from my past or my history. I don't want to avoid any conversation about that.
When Griffin was a teenager, he was sentenced to 2 life terms in prison for killing 18-year-old Ronald Jones in 1995. Under the provisions of the lifer law and review by the parole board, Griffin was deemed rehabilitated and freed in 2017. But Griffin says he's more than a former juvenile lifer. He's a father, a business owner, and a member of the community.
Once people get to meet me and understand me today at 47 years old, it doesn't take away from what I've done in my past, but I believe that it adds context, and most folks would be very pleased with the person that I am today as opposed to who I was at 16 years old.
He says he's already seen community change, like reduction in violent crime, through his work with the ACLU and as the director of the Cure Violence program. He encourages people to reach out and get to know him now and learn about his plans for the 3rd Ward.
What we have today sitting in front of us, standing in front of us, positioning himself to be a leader and voice of this community, to lead this community, he's an entirely different person from what he would have been at 16 years old. And there's no way I see this man making a decision like that.
He also wants to address the intersectionality of mental health in the city's unhoused population and best practices with professional policing and community safety. Kelsey Perdue, who holds one of the 2 3rd Ward seats and is up for re-election this year, tells 13 on Your Side she does intend to run again, with a formal announcement coming soon. That story was just a snippet of my long interview with Griffin. Here's more of what we talked about in an extended On the Docket cut.
1995, I believe. I was 16 in 1995, but there was a dispute between a group of associates and friends that led to a tragic incident where Mr. Jones, a young man, lost his life, and another young man was assaulted by me. This was June of '95. And my upbringing, I won't say that it was abnormal. I had both of my parents in the home until later on in life, but growing up, in an environment here on the southeast side of Grand Rapids, I was raised in the 3rd Ward, went to school in the 3rd Ward. I was a Creston Polar Bear. The environment that shapes and molds young men or gives young men and women platforms to, grow into their personalities and become and expressing themselves, it was a difficult environment in the 90s. And I found myself following behind young men and women who were into nefarious behaviors, and it just naturally I flowed into that as well. The conflict which sent me to prison was one that was between a small group, a friend group or associate group that tragically turned into, the loss of this young man's life. I was the director of Cure Violence program here for the Urban League of West Michigan. And I believe that I was tapped for that role because of the experience of my incarceration and involvement in, gun violence in the community here. It definitely prepared me to be able to understand the struggles and obstacles that young men face when they are involved in behavior that would lead them or put them in proximity to gun violence. And I mean, during my tenure with the program of Pure Violence, we've seen over an 80% reduction in overall aggravated assaults and an over 80% reduction in overall homicides that were committed in third ward target areas. And I don't, elevate that to say that it was the work of myself, but it was the work of my strategy, my team, and the individuals that we brought in to be able to facilitate that program. And the vast majority of those persons were formerly incarcerated men and women who had experienced carceral realities as well, because those closest to the problem, obviously closest to the solution. But I also believe that those of us who are not at the table in discussing the strategy around how do we address gun violence, youth violence, etc., if those persons with lived experience aren't at the table, then we're kind of at the mercy of anybody who's structuring what programs or possibilities there are to move young men and women into a different direction. I would hope that they would see that, when a decision was made while I was 16 years old, hasn't actually defined who I am today. That it, may have pivoted my trajectory in life and caused for me to go in a different direction. But the maturity that has taken place, the growth, the education, all of those things collectively add to who I am today. And I would hope that, somebody would see, well, the decisions that he made, while very horrible decisions, at 16 years old, as a 47, 48-year-old father and business owner, and community member, which, I was none of these things prior to my incarceration. But it doesn't take away from, I believe, not only for community members, but those close to that situation, to say, I have questions about, his qualifications, or I question whether or not somebody can be redeemed or is incorrigible or amendable to treatment in that process. I'd hope that, folks take the time to get a coffee with me or sit down with me to have conversation and say, well, if he made this decision at 16 years old, and these were the consequences that, and came about from those actions, what we have today sitting in front of us, standing in front of us, positioning himself to be a leader and voice of this community, to lead this community, he's an entirely different person from what he would have been at 16 years old. And there's no way I see this man making a decision like that. But I understand, folks wanting to question or vet, my qualifications, my experience, and I welcome that. It's all, I understand that that's the process, and I look forward to having those conversations with community members or other leaders in the community who may have those questions for me as well. Something that was pivotal for me in my growth as a young man, knowing that I had caused my community harm, my family harm, I had caused other folks in the community harm. There was a point where I had to make a decision about whose fault it was that I was in the space that I was in. And I knew that I was the common denominator to everything that I had experienced. And I knew that it was because I did not accept myself for who I was at the time. Highly educated, extremely intelligent as a young man. And I just, as we grow up, we get involved with things that take our attention away from what's most important or should be prioritized. But the young men and women in this community who have experienced similar, upbringings, backgrounds, circumstances, you are not going to be defined by your worst mistake. You are not your worst mistake. But there's, give yourself grace to grow into who you are, and be comfortable with the person that you are, because that's going to be your anchor. You are your own anchor in this regard. But I am always available for young men and women to touch base with regarding, their direction, their experiences. But I would hope that young men and women see, somebody who's in their 40s, close to 50 now, interested in local government, in leadership, that has made a change in his life from those experiences. You know, nobody can say, well, and oftentimes young people will say, well, you've never lived what I've lived. You don't come from what I come from. And for me, then that is not necessarily the truth, because I am a candidate or a leader and a voice that has experienced exactly what young men and women are experiencing here. So I'd hope that they see that it is possible for them to make a change and to grow and not to give up on themselves in that process. I want to tell the Third Ward that I am going to be a dedicated and committed voice of leadership for them, and that I'm going to be unwavering as that voice and as that committed leader to this community. I look forward to representing the folks from the Third Ward, if that be the case here in November, but definitely opening the doors for more conversation to get to know who Richard Griffin actually is, and to communicate to them that door is open. And I look forward to meeting the folks in the Third Ward who don't know me and who I'm not acquainted with, so that they can get a better understanding of who I am as an individual, but where we can go collectively as a community.
And if people want to get in contact with you, how can they reach out to you?
They can reach out to voterichardgriffin.com. My email address or our website is info@voterichardgriffin.com. But they can check our website and contact me directly from that, and they can set up coffee hours from my website, or in more private conversations if they'd like to.
Anything else you'd like to have here?
No, I appreciate you all. Definitely circling back to say, let us have a more of a pointed conversation about who this individual actually is. I know that media oftentimes likes to take the sexy title, yeah, right? And I don't have an issue with that. I don't run from my past or my history. I don't want to avoid any conversation about that. So, that the idea that it was characterized as a former juvenile lifer, yeah, that's running for Third Ward. I am a former juvenile lifer, but I'm also a father. And I'm also a business owner. I'm also a brother, a friend, and I'm a member of this community. And I think that, once people get to meet me and understand me today at 47 years old, it doesn't take away from what I've done in my past, but I believe that it adds context, and most folks would be very pleased with the person that I am today as opposed to who I was at 16 years old.
Thanks for joining me on this episode of On the Docket on 13+. We have new episodes releasing every week, taking you into the courtroom for the latest updates and deep dives on crime in and around West Michigan. In the meantime, we'll bring you the latest on crime in court, both on air and online at 13onyourside.com. And when breaking news affects you and your community, we stream live on 13+ with what you need to know right when you need to know. We'll see you next time with updates on What's on the Docket.